Geoff Mosher, covers the Birds, FanRag Sports, at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter. And an interesting article that he wrote about, which I guess is accurate considering the Eagles made this trade at the deadline, Jeff, is you said they've really changed the mentality of the franchise from August, and that was displayed on Tuesday when Howie Roseman made a trade of this level. It seems that the thinking has shifted from let's see what we have to let's make a run.
Yeah, I mean, even though it still feels like August outside, as you guys were just talking about with this weather, it's just been unbelievable to see in just a short amount of time. Two things, guys, right? It's been unbelievable to see the Carson Wentz development into a great quarterback. And who would have thought that he'd be so good? And not that it's not a team effort, but he has really far exceeded year two expectations. But who would have thought now that at 7-1, the same general manager or vice president of football operations, Howie Roseman, the same owner, Jeffrey Lurie, who back in, just 8 weeks ago, training camp, Jeffrey had that impromptu press conference, and he basically says, remember, we're in year two of a phase, of a plan. It almost sounded Sam Hinkie-ish, right? It was all about build up and, listen, we want to be competitive, but let's not go crazy, and all their moves from the offseason, no long-term deals. It all reflected that measured approach, and then you turn around and say, wait a minute, we're the best team in the NFL record-wise. Let's go for it. So it's amazing how quickly the shift in thinking about the expectations and what the Eagles could do could happen.
What do you think their expectations were entering this year? Like, what was realistic from the front office that they would like to have seen as progress from a 7-9 team a year ago?
I just know from talking to some people that it was, listen, I think last year they went through some real peaks and valleys. They were not a consistent team. It was year one of Carson. I think from what I gathered, just going into the year, they were very focused on developing Carson Wentz. And, as logic would dictate, if you develop your quarterback, if your quarterback plays better, then naturally your team is going to be better. You're going to be more competitive. So I don't know if they had a number. I think they were, for the first time in a while, trying to avoid numerical kind of comparisons. I think that they were really just concerned with, is the team getting better? They were 7-9 last year. Are you seeing the improvement from the quarterback, the fewer interceptions, comebacks in the fourth quarter, better mechanics, better footwork, and if so, that's probably going to make us a better team. I don't think beyond their wildest expectations did they think that they might have thought that they could, contend for the NFC East, but I don't think they will be at all. If you shot them up with truth serum, none of them would have told you that they'd be winning it by 2.5, 3 games in October.
Geoff Mosher, FanRag Sports. Do you think that they anticipated this much growth from Carson Wentz?
No, I mean, and that's the thing. It's so hard, right? And with a quarterback, you're just trying to. There's so many phases, right? When you draft a quarterback top 2, top 5, the first thing you try to learn is, can he actually play in the NFL? Because it's really a 50-50 proposition. There's a lot of guys that don't make it. The past 2 or 3 years, they're out, whether they're Jake Locker or Ryan Leaf or whoever you want to, throw in there. Tim Couch, Achilles Smith. It goes back a long time. There's always guys that are complete busts. And then once a guy proves that he can play a little bit, then it's, can he be better than just a mediocre quarterback, right? So there's phases to these things. And then, phase 3 is like, can your good quarterback actually win playoff games, which, you don't find out sometimes until later down the road. Look at Eli Manning and how bad he was in his first 2 playoff games. So I think that they did not know what to expect, and I think that they are so pleasantly surprised by his development, and they think that it's so real that it made them go out and make a move to get in like Ajayi.
Yeah, as you wrote at FanRag Sports, the Eagles proved they are all in with the Jay Ajayi trade, and it was surprising that they were able to get a guy like that for a 4th-round pick. And I guess when you talk about a change, so much has changed, Jeff, but one guy has really 2. I mean, Jeffrey, but Howie. So much has changed in this organization. They have flipped over quarterbacks and coaches and personnel, but Howie went from the penthouse to the outhouse and back to the penthouse. Should he be given a lot of credit here? Is this an organizational difference that it's a streamlined credit? I mean, how much does Roseman play into the different, the shift in mentality of this organization?
Well, I certainly think Howie deserves a lot of credit. I mean, I think with everything, it's there's a lot of different people. I think Joe Douglas has come in here as his top personnel guy, and you notice that there's that Baltimore connection with a guy like Tim Jernigan, right, or even his Chicago connection with Alshon Jeffrey. It seems like all their offseason moves are geared toward guys who are tough-minded guys, maybe some guys with championship pedigree, guys who played in cold weather. Certainly Howie deserves credit for a lot of the trades. Getting Wentz, I had heard about that after the Senior Bowl, that they really were high on Wentz, but I think that Doug also deserves a lot of credit for that. Clearly, they were leaning on Doug Peterson for some input into quarterback in that situation. Right. So I think in that case, I think you give both those guys credit. The Darby trade was a really good trade. It was an excellent trade. It hasn't paid off yet because he hasn't played, but you got to think that's a guy who fits Jim Schwartz's system, and it's going to be a good trade in the end. But he did give up a third-round pick in Jordan Matthews. I heard a couple of people say, man, Howie's just been fleecing everybody. And I'm like, I don't think he's fleeced anyone. I think he's made good trades, but he's also given up a decent amount. I mean, he gave up a lot to go get Carson Wentz. It worked out. He gave up a third-round pick and Jordan Matthews to go get Ronald Darby. He gave up, he swapped third-round picks to get Tim Jernigan, and that looked like a very good – those are all good trades. But, in the third round, there were a lot of running backs that went in that neighborhood that they could have originally picked, including, I think, Kareem Hunt, right? And they passed on that. And then that forced them to have to go out and kind of redo the running back situation and getting Jay Ajayi. Everybody loves the Darby trade, and I think it's good. But if you don't trade Eric Rowe for no reason, if you keep him on team, maybe he develops along with the way Jalen Mills has played, or your number two pick in Sidney Jones, and you don't have to go get Ronald Darby. So some of the trades I think he's made are through correct wrongs in the past, but nonetheless, I think that they've all made sense for the direction of the organization.
Hey, Mosher, are you concerned about LeGarrette Blount and his status and role moving forward because of this deal?
Yeah. I think, they tried to pass it off as, oh, he's still a starter, and I think Howie or Doug, one of those guys, said that they called up LeGarrette just to let him know what was happening, and it's like, that was their statement. Well, we called up LeGarrette so he knows. Well, it doesn't mean he's happy with it. Just because you called him up and told him doesn't mean he has to like it. Yesterday he was in the locker room and he kind of gave a, this is good for the team. That's fine, more the merrier type thing. But I know there's incentives in his contract that are going to be, potentially altered or not, reachable, because I expect Ajayi is going to play a pretty big role for this team as they integrate him more and more into the offense. So we'll see. I think with a guy like LeGarrette, it's always you kind of wonder what he's thinking, the combustibility element of it. And now you kind of give it a reason to be a little bit more combustible. But let's be honest, guys, as nice as good as he's been a player, if he makes a big stink about this and he really becomes a distraction, he could be gone. I mean, now you have Ajayi now, Smallwood, Clements has played well. I think it would weaken you a little bit because, it's nice to have that combination, but if Ajayi is going to be your guy going forward anyway, it's probably not the biggest deal.
Yep, Ajayi under contract through 2018, Blount a free agent after the season. So, Geoff Mosher, a lot of people like this trade. Do you like it, and how do you think, do you like how he fits in this offense? Because he wasn't having a great year, and some people do talk about malcontent or his attitude. Other people talked about his knees.
Yeah, Pete, it's a good question. I like the talent of it. What you worry about is, he seems to be a kind of a guy who, last year they made the playoffs, things were good, and he had a great year. This year they're struggling, even though they have a winning record. You can tell by watching them they're not very good, and his attitude was not very good. So you worry about that whole kind of front-runner type attitude. And then the other thing is you kind of worry about the knees. I know that the organization itself, the Eagles, they had checked him out 2 years ago coming out, and there were concerns about the knees there. I mean, every organization was concerned about it because he fell to the fifth round despite a pretty good career. So at the end of the day, though, the Eagles have been looking for a guy who can do what they want from the offense that they like to run. And we've talked about this in the past. LeGarrette has done well in spurts, but you have to go under center if you want to give them the ball and get the most out of them. And they like to be in the shotgun and use those RPOs. They like to spread it out. They like to go no huddle at certain times, and it's hard to do that when LeGarrette's in the game. You have to go under center, and you can't be shotgun. Ajayi is a guy who can run out of the shotgun. He did it in Miami, so he's more used to it. He gives you power like LeGarrette Blount does, but he also gives you quickness and speed. like, say, Wendell Smallwood might. So he's like the combination of all of the running backs that they already have into one guy. So he makes more sense, and he only costs a fourth-round pick. And even though this team doesn't have a lot of picks, a fourth-round pick for a talent like that, I think, is worth it when you're trying to all of a sudden go for it.
Yeah, and they did have multiple fourth-round picks. Now, they don't have their second, they don't have their third, so they'll have a 1 and 2 4s. And
they're worried they gave up too much, but at the same time, see, Jeff, Howie has this magical ability sometimes to get those picks back. Like you say at the time, like, hey, he gave up too much, but then by the time you get to April of the draft, all of a sudden those picks are back.
Yeah, I mean, go look at 2 drafts ago. They had they traded up to get Carson Wentz, and then they didn't have a pick until the 3rd round, and they got Sam Alou, and then they didn't have a pick until the 5th round when they got Big V, who's a starter for them, and who's the other 5th round pick? Was it Smallwood? Or was he a 7th?
5th round for Smallwood.
And Mills. Yeah, they got Smallwood, and then the 7th round they got Mills. And so it's not really, as long as you can make the most of your picks, you're good. And again, like it's not a lot to give up for the guy. It's a lot to give up when you don't have picks like they do. But that's why we say that it's an indication that they're really going for it. How many times do you get to have the best record in the NFL at a time where your division rival Giants stink, and Aaron Rodgers is out with a broken collarbone and probably not coming back, and the reigning NFC champions are barely 500, not very good in the Atlanta Falcons. So there's an opportunity to go for it. You might as well go for it.
And they seemingly are. They're 7-1, but they do have some injury issues. So, Jeff, at the deadline, they get Jay Ajayi. We seemingly like the move, but was that the number one thing they needed to address at the deadline? Did they pinpoint the right issue?
Well, I mean, clearly they didn't. They needed help on the offensive line, but I mean, the price to pay for Dwayne Brown, which was for the Seahawks, at the time it was a player and 2 fairly decent picks. I don't think the Eagles could have been in on that. That's just too much. I think a 4th-round pick for Ajayi is a nice little bargain, but I don't think they could have given up 3 picks or a player and 2 picks or something like that without really kind of evening themselves out. You get the left tackle, and where did you weaken yourself going forward on the roster? And I think Big V played all right. I think he did. I really did. So we'll see. Like they keep telling you, and it's true, a lot of these pass rushers are going to face, whether it's Von Miller, whether it's Khalil Mack, DeMarcus Lawrence, they line up across Lane Johnson anyway.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, the perception is we remember the thing that sticks out, And for Big V, what sticks out was he was awful against the Redskins in his first game, and we can't get past that, a lot of people. But since that night, he has calmed himself down and played pretty well. Does that mean he's an all-pro left tackle? Not necessarily, but in a league that has terrible offensive line play, he is serviceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Serviceable, and the thing you remember from last year is that even though he struggled early against you hit it on the head. He struggled early in that Washington game, but how many games did he start after that? And how well did he play moving forward? I think the thing that sticks out to me is that, yes, he's not going to be an all-pro. He's not going to be a 7-time Pro Bowl. I doubt it. But what sticks out to me is that they won that game on Sunday 33-10, even though they struggled a little bit offensively, and he didn't get help. They did not help him in pass protection situations. It's not like they had to devote extra resources to making up for his deficiencies. He played left tackle, and they put him out there on an island, and he held his own.
Speaking about out on an island and being on his own, how about Jalen Mills, another guy you wrote about? And, he's an interesting guy because so many people were anti-Mills. The Pro Football Focus had him ranked as the worst corner in the league. And when you heard this offseason before Darby got here that, hey, they're looking at as Mills as maybe their best guy, people were like, well, there's no way you could be a playoff team with that. What has he done to show and prove that he belongs and has become a key cog on that defense, really?
Well, I think the big thing that sticks out to me, every time I talk to him, Mike, and he's a guy who is in the books and in the film room and constantly studying. That pass he picked off, he basically detailed for me the entire route that he knew Pierre Garçon was going to run, cool. How many times he had seen it on film leading up, some plays earlier in the game that might have set it up. And that's what, when you're Jalen Mills and you're a 7th-round pick and you run a 4.6, right, you need to be beating somebody else in some other phase of the game. And for him, it's studying and keeping his nose in the book, and he's completely, totally unconcerned or unburdened by the fact that there's a Sidney Jones or a Sewell Douglas or a Ronald Darby. He's just literally trying to do his work every single day and do the best he can. And I think that has been an excellent attitude for him. I think it's helped him survive. Who knows what's going to happen going forward? I don't know what the Eagles are going to do with him in the long term, but he keeps proving to people that you can say what you want about his speed, about his coverage, but he's going to compensate with just, his smarts and instincts, and probably helps that he went to LSU. Those guys just are naturally good defensive backs in the league, so he had a good pedigree there. And it's a good story. It's like it's a microcosm story of this team, I really think.
Moshe, I saw him wearing his LSU gear on television when he was interviewed and available. I have two questions for you off of that last answer that you just said. One, did he detail and did he know that Fletcher Cox was going to lay out Joe Staley to create the path to the end zone? And then two, is he in Brian Dawkins' old locker? Is he down on that end right when you first walk in?
He is on that end. He's on that end, so and I'm sure he is one of those guys that kind of walks up to B-Dawk all the time and kind of gets information and advice and all that stuff. He's it's kind of funny. I never even made that connection a little bit that he's in the Dawkins. Remember, Dawkins had like 2 lockers. So
that's right.
I think both Mills
he's only in one, yes.
Yeah.
He's skinnier too. He's
he
smaller.
Hasn't gotten Weapon X treatment just yet. Just yet.
Jeff, obviously, there's a game this weekend. They play the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos were a team a couple of weeks ago when you saw that team coming here. You're thinking, good defense, this team's pretty sound. Things have gone south for them so much so that they're making a quarterback switch right before they play the Philadelphia Eagles this week. So give us your thoughts on Denver having, switching quarterbacks and what concerns you about this team that is struggling a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's weird. Everything's going so well for the Eagles right now, and then they come upon a situation where the Broncos come into town. And remember how many times, myself included, I'm sure we'll all raise our hand and say how many people looked at this game before the season, or even 2 weeks in, right, when they had beaten Dallas and thought, man, this is going to be a really tough game for the Eagles. And I still expect it will be, because I think the defense is going to have to really step up and compensate. And, but the bottom line is, it's Brock Osweiler. I know he has a winning record as a starter for them, but whenever an offense is struggling like that, like the way they have, and you come into Philadelphia and the Eagles are playing well and their defense has been as good as it's been, it's advantage Eagles. And so this is now one of those games where you think the Eagles should really win this game. Now, maybe they'll struggle a little bit offensively, but talent for talent, as long as they don't let, like, Von Miller single-handedly wreck a game, which he, can do, then they should be able to control this game.
They would get to the bye week at 8-1 with the Dallas Cowboys on the other side of that thing. Geoff Mosher, FanRag Sports, at Geoff Mosher NFL, as the Eagles take on the Broncos this weekend. Jeff, always a pleasure, my friend.
See you guys next week.